Hollywood, the land of dreams, fame, and fortune. A place where the streets are said to be paved with gold, where unknown faces can become icons overnight, and where stars shine brighter than anywhere else on earth. But behind the flashing lights, the glamorous premieres, and the whispers of adoring fans, there is a darker side, a world where one misstep, one scandal, or even one whispered accusation can erase a lifetime of success. In Hollywood, your crown of glory can turn into a noose around your neck faster than the cameras can flash. For every fairy tale rise to stardom, there are countless stories of downfall. Some stars are undone by their own mistakes, others are victims of scandal, and some are destroyed by forces far more powerful than themselves: politics, money, or the hidden hands of Hollywood's gatekeepers. And once those gates are closed, once the industry decides you no longer belong, you're not just forgotten, you're erased. Tonight, we peel back the curtain to reveal 10 shocking stories of actors and actresses who were banned from Hollywood. Some once commanded box offices and award stages, yet found themselves cast into the shadows. Some dared to challenge power and were silenced for it. Others became cautionary tales of fame, excess, and scandal. Each story is different, yet all share the same truth: Hollywood's love is fleeting, and its punishment can be permanent. These aren't just tabloid rumors or fleeting gossip. These are real stories of real stars, people who reached the highest peaks of fame only to lose it all. From comedy legends who defined an era, to Oscar-winning actresses whose names vanished from marquees, these tales remind us how fragile stardom really is. Imagine giving your life to your craft, creating art that moves millions, only to find that a single mistake, or a single enemy in power, can close every door. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the very industry that once adored you now wants nothing to do with you. For these stars, that nightmare became their reality. Some managed to claw their way back into the spotlight, proving resilience even in exile. Others never escaped the shadows, their legacies forever marked by scandal or betrayal. But each one holds a story that Hollywood tried to bury. And tonight, we're digging them back up. So buckle in, because the truth is stranger and darker than fiction. Let's begin with the man who once made the world laugh harder than anyone else. A genius, a rebel, a legend. And yet, a man whose laughter was silenced not by failure, but by politics. This is the story of Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin's story doesn't begin with red carpets and laughter. It begins in the slums of London, in poverty so deep that even as a child he often found himself in workhouses. His mother was plagued by illness, his father absent, and little Charlie knew hunger and hardship far more intimately than comfort or love. Yet, out of this struggle, he discovered a gift: the ability to make people laugh. That gift would eventually carry him from the dark alleys of London all the way to the brightest stage in the world, Hollywood. By the 1910s and 1920s, Chaplin had become more than just an actor. He was a phenomenon. His creation, the tramp, with the bowler hat, cane, and oversized shoes, was instantly recognizable across the globe. Audiences didn't just laugh at him, they adored him. Chaplin wasn't just telling jokes, he was telling stories that touched the heart. He gave the world slapstick, yes, but also a mirror to society. Behind every pratfall was a message about poverty, love, and survival. Then came his boldest work, films like Modern Times and The Great Dictator. These weren't just comedies, they were social commentary. In Modern Times, Chaplin critiqued the crushing weight of industrialization. In The Great Dictator, released in 1940, he stood alone as one of the first to openly mock Adolf Hitler, long before America had entered World War II. That speech at the end of the film, pleading for kindness, for democracy, for humanity, still echoes as one of cinema's greatest moments. But while Chaplin was beloved by audiences, he was not beloved by everyone. By the 1940s, America had entered a period of suspicion and fear. Communism became the nation's greatest enemy, and anyone suspected of sympathizing with socialist ideals was seen as a threat. Chaplin, with his outspoken political views, his refusal to become an American citizen despite decades of living in the country, and his films that often sided with the poor and downtrodden, was an easy target. The FBI began keeping files on him. Newspapers painted him as un-American. His personal life only added fuel to the fire. His relationships with much younger women and messy paternity suits created scandals that tabloids devoured. Chaplin had spent years building himself into the most famous comedian alive, but now forces beyond his control were tearing that reputation apart. In 1952, Chaplin boarded a ship for London with his family, intending to attend the premiere of his latest film, Limelight. What he didn't know was that this would be the last time he would ever see the United States as his home. While he was away, the US government revoked his re-entry permit. America, the land where he had built his career, where he had given audiences joy for decades, had slammed the door shut. Officially, he wasn't charged with a crime. Unofficially, he was labeled a communist sympathizer and a moral threat to American society. For Chaplin, it was exile. He moved to Switzerland, where he would spend the rest of his life. From the outside, it might have looked peaceful. He lived in a mansion with his wife and children, surrounded by beauty. But for the man who had built Hollywood comedy, who had stood at the very center of its golden age, it was a bitter banishment. He had created an art form, yet was no longer welcome in the very town that had crowned him king. Years later, Hollywood would attempt to make amends. In 1972, Chaplin was invited back to receive an honorary Oscar. When he stepped onto the stage, the audience rose to its feet in a standing ovation that lasted for 12 minutes, the longest in Academy history. It was as if the world was finally apologizing for turning its back on him. But the truth could not be erased. The laughter he gave to millions had not been enough to protect him from suspicion, politics, and scandal. In the end, the man who made the whole world laugh was exiled from the one place that owed him the most. The man who built Hollywood comedy was no longer welcome in Hollywood itself. Before Charlie Chaplin, before Buster Keaton, there was another giant of comedy, literally and figuratively. Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle was one of the first true superstars of Hollywood's silent era. With his enormous size and surprising grace, he could tumble, leap, and bumble across the screen with a charm that made audiences roar with laughter. He wasn't just another funny man. Arbuckle was among the highest-paid actors of his time, earning a staggering $1 million contract with Paramount in 1921, an unheard-of sum back then. Hollywood loved him. Audiences adored him. He seemed untouchable. But all of that changed in a single weekend. In September of 1921, Arbuckle hosted a party at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. Prohibition was in full swing, but that didn't stop the flow of alcohol. Among the guests was a young actress named Virginia Rappe. What happened next has remained one of Hollywood's most notorious mysteries. Rappe fell seriously ill during the party and died a few days later of peritonitis, caused by a ruptured bladder. Within hours, whispers turned into accusations, and fingers pointed directly at Arbuckle. He was accused of assaulting Rappe so violently that it led to her death. The headlines exploded with lurid details, many invented or exaggerated by sensationalist newspapers eager to sell copies. Stories painted Arbuckle as a drunken monster, a man whose jovial on-screen persona masked a depraved private life. William Randolph Hearst, the powerful newspaper magnate, famously declared that this scandal sold more papers than the sinking of the Titanic. The public was horrified. Arbuckle went from beloved clown to public enemy overnight. Hollywood panicked. Studios immediately withdrew his films from circulation. Theaters refused to screen anything with his name attached. The man who had once been one of Hollywood's greatest assets had suddenly become its greatest liability. The trial that followed was a circus. Arbuckle faced not one, but 3 separate trials for manslaughter. In the courtroom, the prosecution painted him as a violent brute. The defense argued that Rappe's death was tragic, but not Arbuckle's doing. Witnesses contradicted each other, evidence was shaky, and the entire case was fueled more by public outrage than by hard facts. The first 2 trials ended in hung juries. The press crucified him, turning every detail into scandal. By the time of the 3rd trial in 1922, Arbuckle's career was already in tatters. But then, something remarkable happened. The jury deliberated for only 6 minutes before returning with a unanimous not guilty verdict. They didn't stop there. They issued a formal statement apologizing to Arbuckle, declaring that a great injustice had been done to him. But it was too late. The damage was irreversible. Hollywood might have cleared his name in court, But in the court of public opinion, Arbuckle was already condemned. Studios, fearful of public backlash, refused to hire him. His $1 million contract vanished. His reputation, once golden, was now permanently stained. Arbuckle tried to make a comeback, directing under a pseudonym, but the magic was gone. The man who had once been a pioneer of film comedy, who helped shape Hollywood itself, lived out his remaining years in obscurity. He died in 1933 at the age of 46, just as he was finally beginning to find small opportunities to return to the screen. The scandal had stolen more than his career, it had stolen his legacy. For decades, his name was synonymous not with laughter, but with disgrace. The tragedy of Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle is that he was found innocent, formally, legally, and completely. The jury apologized, but Hollywood never did. Arbuckle's fall was not the result of guilt, but of perception, proof that in Hollywood, reputation can be destroyed long before the truth is revealed. Though found innocent, Hollywood had already decided his fate. For a time, Mel Gibson was the ultimate Hollywood success story. Born in New York but raised in Australia, he shot to stardom in the late 1970s as the leather-clad anti-hero of Mad Maximum. With his piercing blue eyes, rugged charm, and intensity on screen, Gibson was magnetic. By the 1980s, he had conquered both the Australian film industry and Hollywood, solidifying his fame with the Lethal Weapon franchise. He wasn't just a movie star, he was a global icon, the kind of actor audiences would flock to theaters just to see. Then came Braveheart in 1995. Gibson didn't just star in the historical epic, he directed it. The result was a box office smash that won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Director and Best Picture. Mel Gibson stood at the very peak of the Hollywood mountain. He had gone from scrappy outsider to one of the most powerful figures in the industry. It seemed nothing could stop him. But behind the success, cracks were forming. Gibson's personal life was often turbulent, and his demons were never far from the surface. By the early 2000s, those demons stepped into the spotlight for the whole world to see. In 2006, Gibson was arrested in Malibu for driving under the influence. What might have been just another embarrassing celebrity mugshot spiraled into a scandal that nearly destroyed him. During the arrest, he launched into a drunken tirade, spewing anti-Semitic remarks at the officers. The news hit Hollywood like an earthquake. Overnight, the charismatic star who once played heroes was branded as something darker. The scandal didn't stop there. In the years that followed, Gibson's reputation took further blows. He was accused of racist comments, caught on tape making violent threats against his former partner Oksana Grigorieva, and publicly shamed in ways few stars of his stature had ever experienced. Once a household name synonymous with blockbuster success, Gibson was now the face of disgrace. Hollywood reacted swiftly. Studios distanced themselves. Producers quietly cut ties. Projects that had once been greenlit with his name attached were suddenly dead in the water. Actors and filmmakers openly condemned him. It wasn't just a scandal, it was an exile. For nearly a decade, Gibson was radioactive. In an industry obsessed with image, his was too toxic to touch. For a man who had once ruled the box office, it was a spectacular fall from grace. Gibson, the fearless warrior of Braveheart, the action star who had entertained millions, was now a pariah. His downfall was a reminder of how quickly Hollywood could turn its back, no matter how high the pedestal. Yet even the most disgraced stars sometimes get a second chance. In 2016, Gibson made an unexpected return with Hacksaw Ridge. Directing rather than starring, he told the true story of Desmond Doss, a pacifist medic who became a World War II hero. The film was both a critical and commercial success, earning 6 Academy Award nominations and winning 2. For a moment, it looked as though Gibson had clawed his way back, proving that his talent behind the camera could overshadow his troubled past. But Hollywood has a long memory. Even as Hacksaw Ridge revived his career, the shadow of his scandals lingered. Many still refused to work with him. Others couldn't forget the words and actions that had led to his downfall. His redemption was partial at best, a reminder that while a great film can win awards, it doesn't always heal reputations. Mel Gibson's story is not one of a simple rise and fall, but of a man battling his own worst instincts. He conquered the global box office, won the highest honors in filmmaking, and returned from the brink of exile. But the scars of his controversies remain. In Hollywood, talent can open doors, but demons can slam them shut just as quickly. He conquered the box office, but could not conquer his own demons. There was a time when Winona Ryder was the face of a generation. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, she was Hollywood's dark-eyed darling, the quirky outsider who made audiences fall in love with her unique charm. She first caught attention in Beetlejuice, 1988, playing the gothic teenager Lydia with a deadpan wit that felt refreshingly real. From there, her career soared. Edward Scissorhands, 1990, made her a household name, pairing her with Johnny Depp in a story that felt as much fairy tale as it did tragedy. By the mid-1990s, she had starred in Little Women, 1994, earning an Academy Award nomination, and had become one of the most bankable actresses in Hollywood. She wasn't just acting in films, she was defining an era. But Hollywood is fickle, and even America's sweetheart can fall from grace with a single scandal. In December 2001, Winona Ryder walked into Saks Fifth Avenue in Beverly Hills. By the end of the day, she was arrested for shoplifting thousands of dollars worth of luxury clothing and accessories. The news spread like wildfire. Winona, known for her intelligence, her sophistication, her carefully curated image, was suddenly plastered across tabloids as a criminal. The trial was a circus. Cameras followed her every step into the courtroom. Headlines mocked her. Jokes about her arrest became late-night punchlines. Hollywood, which once celebrated her individuality, now branded her as unstable, unreliable, damaged goods. Though Ryder never fully explained her reasons, reports suggested she was struggling at the time. With depression, with the pressures of fame, with the sense of isolation that often comes with stardom. But the media wasn't interested in sympathy. They wanted a fallen angel, and they had one. The consequences were brutal. Almost overnight, Hollywood quietly turned its back on her. Leading roles dried up. Big studios avoided her. Casting directors whispered about her reputation. An actress who once carried films was suddenly invisible, reduced to small supporting parts and guest appearances. For years, Ryder seemed like a ghost of her former self, fading into the margins of an industry that once adored her. But Hollywood loves a comeback story, and Ryder's redemption was as surprising as her downfall. In 2016, she returned to the spotlight in Stranger Things, the Netflix series that became a global phenomenon. As Joyce Byers, the frantic but determined mother searching for her son, Ryder reminded audiences of what made her a star in the first place. She was raw, vulnerable, and unforgettable. Younger viewers discovered her for the first time, while longtime fans celebrated the return of their beloved icon. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. An actress once cast aside as damaged had found new life in a story about broken families, resilience, and survival against impossible odds. Stranger Things didn't just revive her career. It reintroduced Winona Ryder to the world on her own terms. For Winona, the fall was sudden, but the rise again was even more surprising. In the 1990s, Mira Sorvino seemed unstoppable. She was the kind of actress critics adored, intelligent, magnetic, and versatile. After small but striking early roles, she exploded onto the scene with Woody Allen's Mighty Aphrodite, 1995. Her performance as the witty, big-hearted prostitute won her an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. In her acceptance speech, she thanked her parents, including her father, the legendary actor Paul Sorvino, and the world seemed to agree. This was just the beginning of a long reign in Hollywood. She wasn't just another young starlet. Sorvino was Harvard-educated, fluent in multiple languages, and dedicated to her craft. She could do comedy in Romy and Michelle's High School Reunion, 1997, just as easily as drama in At First Sight, 1999. Casting directors praised her range, directors loved working with her, and audiences embraced her. By every measure, Mira Sorvino should have been a household name for decades. But then, something strange happened. By the early 2000s, her career slowed down. The kinds of roles that should have been hers, the prestige dramas, the big-budget films, never came her way. Instead, she drifted into television movies and smaller projects. Industry insiders whispered, but no one could quite explain it. How did an Oscar winner with so much promise vanish from the spotlight so quickly? For years, Sorvino herself wondered the same thing. She auditioned, she campaigned, she waited. But doors that once opened easily now remained closed. She wasn't fading by choice, she was being erased. Then came the revelations of the #MeToo movement in 2017. When women across Hollywood began speaking out against Harvey Weinstein, Mira Sorvino's name surfaced in the most shocking way. She revealed that Weinstein had made unwanted advances toward her in the 1990s. When she rejected him, she believed, her career paid the price. Directors and producers later confirmed what she had long suspected. Weinstein had actively blacklisted her, whispering in the ears of powerful men, ensuring that her name was quietly removed from casting lists. It wasn't lack of talent. It wasn't bad luck. It was sabotage, deliberate, calculated, and cruel. The truth finally came out when filmmaker Peter Jackson revealed that during casting for The Lord of the Rings, he had originally considered Sorvino. But Weinstein's company, then in control of the project, warned him against her, labeling her difficult to work with. Jackson admitted that those comments influenced his decisions, effectively shutting Sorvino out of what became one of the most iconic film trilogies of all time. For Sorvino, the revelation was both painful and vindicating. Years of self-doubt, of wondering why her career had derailed, were replaced with clarity. It wasn't her fault. It had never been her fault. She hadn't lost Hollywood. Hollywood had been stolen from her. Her silence wasn't by choice, it was by force. Today, Mira Sorvino continues to act, reclaiming her place in an industry that once betrayed her. She speaks openly about her experience, lending her voice to movements that demand accountability and change. And while the years she lost can never be returned, her courage ensures that her story will never again be silenced. Ashley Judd was never just another actress in Hollywood. She was a force. In the 1990s, she became known for her powerful screen presence, starring in thrillers like Kiss the Girls, 1997, and Double Jeopardy, 1999. Audiences admired her intensity, her intelligence, and her ability to play women who weren't simply victims, but fighters. Off-screen, she was just as compelling, an outspoken activist, educated, articulate, and unwilling to play by the traditional rules of celebrity. By all accounts, Judd's career should have continued to soar. She had box office hits, critical acclaim, and the kind of name recognition that guaranteed longevity. Yet, by the early 2000s, her trajectory began to change. The roles became fewer, the calls from studios less frequent. For years, it was a mystery. How could a woman with so much talent, so much presence, simply fade from Hollywood's spotlight? The answer came years later, and it was far darker than anyone could have imagined. Like Mira Sorvino, Ashley Judd's name surfaced during the Harvey Weinstein revelations. She revealed that in the late 1990s, Weinstein had lured her into a hotel room under the guise of discussing business, then pressured her with unwanted advances. Judd refused him, making it clear she would not be intimidated or coerced. At the time, she likely thought it was an uncomfortable encounter she could move past. But in Hollywood, Weinstein's reach was long, and his vengeance, merciless. Judd later learned that she had been quietly blacklisted. Weinstein had whispered to directors and producers that she was difficult to work with, poisoning her reputation. It wasn't because of her talent, or her box office draw, or her work ethic. It was revenge, pure and simple. Her name was erased not by scandal, but by the vindictive power of a man determined to punish those who rejected him. The cost was staggering. Projects that should have been hers slipped away. Most famously, she was once considered for The Lord of the Rings. Director Peter Jackson later admitted that he had thought of casting both Mira Sorvino and Ashley Judd, but had been warned off by Weinstein's company. The decision robbed Judd of what could have been a defining role in one of the greatest film franchises of all time. But Ashley Judd was never one to stay silent. When the #MeToo movement erupted, she emerged as one of its fiercest and most visible voices. She didn't just tell her story, she fought back in court, filing a lawsuit against Weinstein for the damage he had done to her career. Though legal battles proved complicated, her courage inspired countless others to step forward. She became more than an actress. She became a symbol of resistance. Judd's story is a reminder of how power in Hollywood has often been weaponized, not just to exploit, but to erase. Her absence from the big screen in the 2000s wasn't the result of fading talent or waning interest. It was an intentional act of silencing by one of the industry's most powerful men. And yet, Ashley Judd refused to be silenced. She transformed her pain into purpose, using her voice to demand accountability, not just for herself, but for all the women whose careers had been stolen in the shadows. Her name was erased not by scandal, but by revenge. Monique was never afraid to speak her mind. She started out as a stand-up comedian, a bold and brash voice who made audiences laugh with raw honesty and fearless delivery. But she wanted more than laughs. She wanted to show the world that she wasn't just a comic, she was an actress with real dramatic power. That chance came in 2009 with Precious, directed by Lee Daniels. In the film, she played Mary, an abusive mother whose cruelty left audiences horrified and shaken. It was a performance so visceral, so unflinching, that it stunned critics. Monique disappeared into the role, delivering a portrayal of generational trauma that was both terrifying and tragically human. When awards season arrived, she swept nearly every category, culminating in the ultimate prize, the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. Standing on that stage, golden statue in hand, she seemed destined for a long and celebrated career in Hollywood. But instead of her star rising, it fell. In the years following her Oscar win, the roles she expected, the prestige films, the leading offers, never came. Hollywood, it seemed, had quietly closed its doors. For many, it was a mystery. How could an actress deliver one of the most unforgettable performances of the decade, win the industry's highest honor, and then vanish almost overnight? Monique herself provided the answer. She had been blackballed. According to her, the trouble began when she refused to play the game. During the Precious campaign, she was asked to travel extensively to promote the film, attend press events, and do international interviews. Monique declined, saying she had already fulfilled her contractual obligations and needed to put her family first. To some, it was a simple decision. To Hollywood power players, it was seen as defiance. Soon after, Monique claimed she began to feel the consequences. She alleged that influential producer Tyler Perry, director Lee Daniels, and media mogul Oprah Winfrey all contributed to her being pushed out of the industry. Instead of doors opening wider after her Oscar, they slammed shut. The message was clear: in Hollywood, talent and awards are not enough. You must also play by the unspoken rules, or risk being erased. For Monique, the experience was devastating. Winning an Oscar is supposed to guarantee more opportunities, bigger paychecks, and lasting respect. Instead, she found herself fighting just to stay relevant. Offers dwindled, and projects disappeared. She spoke out about being offered roles for salaries far below what her white counterparts were paid, pointing to racial and gender bias in the industry. But every time she raised her voice, the pushback grew stronger. Her story became one of the most shocking cautionary tales in Hollywood. How a woman at the very peak of success could lose everything simply because she refused to bow to the system. Years later, Monique has continued to perform stand-up and act in smaller projects, never wavering in her conviction that she was treated unjustly. In 2022, she announced a reconciliation with Lee Daniels and began to step back into higher-profile work, though the years lost cannot be recovered. Her legacy is now not just about her Oscar-winning performance, but about her fight for respect in an industry that too often silences those who speak truth to power. She won Hollywood's highest honor, and lost Hollywood itself. Kirk Douglas was the embodiment of classic Hollywood masculinity: square jaw, fiery eyes, and a presence that commanded the screen. From Champion, 1949, to Paths of Glory, 1957, he made his name playing men who were hard, uncompromising, and larger than life. Off-screen, Douglas was no different. He was a fighter, a man unwilling to back down when he saw injustice, even if it meant putting his own career on the line. By the 1950s, Hollywood was living in fear. The Red Scare had swept through America, and in its path came the infamous Hollywood blacklist. Actors, directors, and especially writers who were suspected of communist sympathies, or who refused to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee, found themselves unemployable. Careers ended overnight. Screenplays were written under false names, credits given to others, all to hide the identities of those banished from the industry. It was a time when silence meant survival. Few dared to challenge the system. But Kirk Douglas was not a man built for silence. In 1960, Douglas took on one of the most ambitious projects of his career, Spartacus, a historical epic about a slave who defies the Roman Empire. The screenplay was written by Dalton Trumbo, one of the most talented writers in Hollywood, who also happened to be blacklisted. For years, Trumbo had been forced to write under pseudonyms, watching others collect Oscars for his work while he lived in the shadows. Douglas had a choice. He could continue the charade, giving credit to a front writer, protecting his film from controversy and protecting himself from political backlash. Or, he could do something no star had dared before, give Dalton Trumbo his real, rightful credit. It was a risk that could have destroyed him. The Blacklist was powerful, and aligning himself with a blacklisted writer could mean box office failure, political attacks, and personal ruin. Studios warned him not to do it. Advisors begged him to reconsider. But Douglas, staring down the climate of fear, made his decision. When Spartacus premiered, the credits rolled with Dalton Trumbo's name clearly displayed as the screenwriter. It was a simple act, but a seismic one. For the first time, a major Hollywood star had openly defied the blacklist. The reaction was immediate. Some politicians fumed. There were calls to boycott the film. But the tide had already begun to turn. President John F. Kennedy himself crossed picket lines to watch Spartacus, lending the film and Douglas's bold move legitimacy at the highest level. Audiences flocked to see it, and the film became both a box office triumph and a cultural milestone. Kirk Douglas's gamble paid off, but more importantly, it changed Hollywood. By openly crediting Trumbo, he helped break the back of the blacklist. Others followed, and the wall of silence that had dominated the industry for over a decade began to crumble. Douglas later reflected that it was one of the proudest moments of his life, not winning awards, not playing iconic roles, but standing up when everyone else was afraid. In an age of silence, Douglas chose to speak, and changed Hollywood forever. Timothy Dalton was not the typical Hollywood star. Before stepping into the global spotlight, he was a classically trained British actor with a Shakespearean pedigree. He built his reputation on stage, commanding roles in Hamlet and King Lear, and earned respect in period dramas where his intensity and precision made him stand out. When the role of James Bond became vacant in the mid-1980s, Dalton was an unexpected but daring choice. In 1987, he debuted as 007 in The Living Daylights. Gone was the wry charm of Roger Moore or the effortless swagger of Sean Connery. Dalton's Bond was something different, darker, more brooding, closer to the gritty spy of Ian Fleming's novels. Critics were divided, but many praised him for injecting realism into a franchise that had begun to feel cartoonish. 2 years later, he returned in License to Kill, 1989, a violent, revenge-driven tale that pushed the limits of the Bond formula. But Hollywood is rarely kind to those who defy expectations. Dalton's serious, almost cold interpretation of Bond alienated some audiences who longed for a lighter touch. While his films performed respectably, they didn't reach the stratospheric box office highs the studio craved. And when legal disputes stalled the franchise in the early 1990s, Dalton quietly stepped aside, never donning the tuxedo again. For many actors, playing Bond is a springboard to superstardom. For Dalton, it became a cage. Typecast as the forgotten Bond, he struggled to find roles that matched his range. Hollywood, quick to embrace new faces, moved on. Pierce Brosnan took over the franchise in 1995, and Dalton's chapter seemed to close overnight. Unlike others who fell from grace, Dalton's exile was not marked by scandal. He wasn't caught in controversy, nor did he wage war against the industry. His disappearance was quieter, almost crueler. Hollywood didn't destroy him, it simply forgot him. He continued to work, mostly in theater and television, building a loyal fan base among those who appreciated his craft. Years later, he re-emerged in character roles, notably in shows like Penny Dreadful and Doom Patrol, where his gravitas once again shone. But he never reclaimed the A-list spotlight, never returned to the towering fame that comes with being Bond. His story is a reminder that in Hollywood, disappearance doesn't always require disgrace. Sometimes, it's enough to be miscast, misunderstood, or simply inconvenient. Sometimes Hollywood doesn't need a scandal to make you disappear. Isaiah Washington's rise was swift and powerful. After years of steady work in films like Clockers and Romeo Must Die, he found his breakthrough role on television. In 2005, he joined the cast of Grey's Anatomy as Dr. Preston Burke, a brilliant but demanding cardiothoracic surgeon. The show was an instant cultural phenomenon, blending hospital drama with romance and intrigue. For Washington, it was the role of a lifetime. Millions of viewers tuned in each week, and his name was suddenly everywhere. But fame in Hollywood can be as fragile as glass, and for Washington, it shattered in an instant. In 2006, tensions reportedly flared behind the scenes between Washington and co-star Patrick Dempsey. During a heated argument, Washington allegedly used a homophobic slur directed at castmate T.R. Knight. The incident was initially kept quiet, but when details emerged, the fallout was immediate. Hollywood, once his ally, became his judge. The controversy deepened in January 2007, when Washington repeated the slur backstage at the Golden Globes while trying to deny ever saying it. What might have been damage control turned into a career-ending misstep. Headlines blazed, advocacy groups condemned him, and the show's producers faced mounting pressure. By the end of Grey's Anatomy's third season, Washington's character was abruptly written out. What had begun as the peak of his career ended as an exile. Fans were shocked, but the industry had already made up its mind. One moment of anger had rewritten his future. After leaving the show, Washington struggled to find footing in Hollywood. He landed occasional roles in independent films, smaller television appearances, and even a brief return to Grey's Anatomy years later, but the momentum was gone. The mainstream success he once held slipped away, replaced by the reputation of controversy. Unlike others whose careers crumbled under scandal, Washington didn't face accusations of crime or long-standing misconduct. His fall came from words spoken in the wrong place, at the wrong time, under the wrong spotlight. But in an industry where image is everything, those words were enough to brand him permanently. Today, Isaiah Washington remains a talented actor, but his name is forever tied to the incident that cut short his rise. His story stands as a cautionary tale about how quickly Hollywood can close its doors, and how sometimes redemption is never fully possible. In one moment of anger, a career unraveled. Hollywood has always sold the illusion of immortality. The flashing lights, the red carpets, the golden statues, all of it designed to convince us that stars never fade. But as we've seen, the truth is far more fragile. From the silent era to modern times, from Chaplin to Ryder, from Gibson to Sorvino, every story carries the same haunting reminder. Fame is not forever. Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle was once the king of silent comedy, adored by millions. But one accusation, later proven false, was enough to end his career. He was acquitted, but the damage was already done. It was Hollywood's first major scandal, and it set the stage for a brutal lesson. Innocence doesn't always matter when the public has already decided you're guilty. Decades later, Mel Gibson would face his own downfall, not from false accusations, but from his own words and actions. Once the heroic figure of Braveheart, his career collapsed under the weight of anti-Semitic rants, racist remarks, and allegations of abuse. Hollywood shut its doors, and though he clawed his way back with Hacksaw Ridge, his reputation was forever scarred. Gibson's story shows the other side of fame. When demons come from within, there's no studio powerful enough to shield you. Winona Ryder's fall was different still. America's darling of the 1990s, she fell from grace in 2001 with a shoplifting arrest. For years, her name was whispered more as a punchline than a headline. And yet, her comeback with Stranger Things proved that even in Hollywood, redemption is possible. But for others, like Mira Sorvino and Ashley Judd, redemption was stolen before it even began. Both actresses, acclaimed for their talent and beloved by audiences, found their careers mysteriously stalling. Only years later did the truth come out. Harvey Weinstein had blacklisted them, silencing their opportunities as punishment for rejecting him. Their exile wasn't caused by scandal or crime, it was revenge. And it revealed the darker truth of Hollywood. Sometimes, you don't fall because of your mistakes, but because someone powerful decided you should. Monique's story echoed this. After winning an Oscar for Precious, she should have been on top of the world. Instead, her refusal to play Hollywood's political game, press tours, low pay, submission, led to her being blackballed. She won the industry's highest honor, and yet the industry itself turned its back on her. But not all stories here are about defeat. Kirk Douglas, one of Hollywood's greatest legends, stood up during the Red Scare when others stayed silent. By crediting Dalton Trumbo, a blacklisted screenwriter, for Spartacus, he helped break the infamous Hollywood blacklist. Douglas proved that one man's courage could rewrite the rules of an entire industry. Other names remind us that scandal isn't always necessary for exile. Timothy Dalton, despite his talent, was quietly pushed aside after his darker take on James Bond. Sometimes, the politics of taste and timing are enough to erase someone from the A-list. And Isaiah Washington's career crumbled in the span of a single remark, an outburst that Hollywood never forgave. Together, these stories form a mosaic of Hollywood's darker side. Some stars were victims of scandal. Others of politics. Still others of sheer abuse of power. But all of them remind us of the same truth. In Hollywood, one mistake, or one powerful enemy, can erase a lifetime of work. We, as audiences, often see only the finished product. The smile on the red carpet, the flawless performance on screen. But behind that surface lies a ruthless system, where careers are made and destroyed in silence. For every Oscar winner, there is someone forgotten. For every rising star, there is someone blacklisted. And so, the illusion shatters. Behind the fame and fortune lies a fragile truth. In Hollywood, nobody is untouchable. Which of these stories shocked you the most? Was it Arbuckle's fall despite innocence, Sorvino's silence forced by power, or Gibson's self-destruction? Comment below, we want to know your thoughts.